My name is Ryan Carey. I joined the Canadian Armed Forces in January 2002.
What trade and element were you?
I joined infantry officer, um, and well, land obviously, army. Yeah, I guess if not everyone's military that's watching this. Yeah, so army. And joined as an infantry officer, and at the time when you join, you don't know what regiment you're going to be in. And then after my phase training, was fallen told to go to the Royal Canadian Regiment in Petawawa. So that would have been in fall of 2004. I would have got to the regiment then. Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is you were lucky enough.
I was lucky enough. I had wanted that. I had wanted to be in the Royal Canadian Regiment anyways. More, I mean, for family reasons, being closer to home, not only for my spouse but myself as well, because my family's in the Ottawa Valley. So it all, sometimes that's how you got to choose things. It's based on location, right? So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So we already talked about it a bit, but were you ever deployed? And if so, where and when? And what was your job?
Yeah. So we started workup training for Task Force 306. Well, you know how that is, probably 6 months to a year before, and then we deployed in August of 2006 to Kandahar province, and my job there was an infantry officer with Charles Company, so nine platoon commander. And when we first got there, well, like anyone, you do your intake, you do your 1 week of specialized training, and then out you go, right? So we went to, I'm not sure how much you want me to get into the tour, but we went to, let the conversation flow. We we first landed in Spinboldak, and we were setting up our base there, started to patrol the area, and at that point in time, one of the platoons was called out to be the, I believe it was the brigade QRF, it might have been battalion, I can't remember. And then shortly after that, I say that because their kit was all over the place, and shortly after that, we all got called back to the airfield, Kandahar airfield, and nobody really knew what was going on, but we knew that the PPCLI company, A company, had got into quite a substantial engagement west of Kandahar city, and so we had listened to that engagement on the radio, and then went back to Kandahar airfield, received orders, and went into a waiting area, and then launched Op Medusa. So I was, part of Charles Company's assault on the southern south of the Argandab River, and if you were watching the news at the time, it was pretty intense, because we were trying to force the enemy to attack us so that the two other companies could come in from the north, and we received quite a few casualties. We had, I believe, four killed on one day, and then the next day we were strafed by the A-10, and that's when another soldier was killed that day. Plenty more wounded, and then the rest of the tour, it was just kind of like that the whole tour. There was a lot of combat, a lot of it wasn't really an IED war at the time. It was more engagement and getting them out of that area, because we were trying to build a road to try to connect the communities, because the Taliban was trying to isolate, and that's just how they do business. And then I'm home. And then, when I got back, well, now you're training everybody to go over, so you're busy again. And my second daughter was born as soon as I got back, so that was a challenge. She was born in March, got back in late February, and then after that, after doing a lot of the driver courses and everything else that the battalion is tasked with, that's not on the tour. We had the omelet tour at the time, and we were scheduled to go on the omelet tour, but then they grabbed a bunch of the officers and said, no, we got to post you out, so you can come back as company, 2ICs. And so then I went to the school in Saint Jean, at the Canadian Forces Leadership Recruit School in Saint Jean, which was just, again, nonstop, right? Just, it was completely packed and overloaded at the time. And then actually, did my training there, did my AOC, and then went back to battalion as a company 2IC, and then left a year later for family reasons, and went back to Saint Jean as a operations officer, and that's kind of when things started to I'd say they had been unraveling for quite a long time. I think I was in denial of my post-traumatic stress. And luckily for me, there was an officer that noticed it, and I finally did go and felt comfortable enough to go talk to somebody. And unfortunately, it was a pretty it was a rough experience. And then in 2016, I was released medically. Yeah.
Okay. What would you say was the highlight of your career?
Being given that opportunity to command a platoon. I mean, I think maybe I took it for granted. I don't know, but not everyone gets to do that as an officer. Not only to command a platoon in combat, but also to be a Company 2IC in combat, to be a LAV captain in combat, and to be a battle adjutant. So I was able to see war and all the good and the bad from a platoon, headquarters, company headquarters, and a battalion headquarters, and it really opened my eyes. So that experience in Afghanistan, and working with, I had just excellent NCOs, and looking back, I just couldn't have had a better group of men. I didn't have women in my platoon. There was women in another company, but there wasn't a lot of women. I couldn't have gone to a place like that with a better team. And Charles' company had a good esprit de corps, had great leadership. I think at all levels, and I don't think, as an officer, I don't think I could have better training or had better experience than that. Even losing, at one point in time, after September the 4th, we had all of our warrant officers were either killed or wounded. Our company quartermaster was wounded. Our sergeant major was wounded. So all our senior NCOs, and to see the sergeants and the master corporals step up into those roles was, I look back at it now, and I just can't believe it. I just can't believe what they did. We kept the fight going. We just kept it going, right? My warrant officer at the time, the warrant officer in 9 Platoon was wounded just before that. We were under mortar attack. And I think that's one thing that, upon reflection, because I did keep a journal, luckily, that's healing too, because you don't realize how much was involved in that tour. And say, well, I'm alive, that's good enough. But all that stuff keeps coming back to you. And I think this is going a bit away from the question, but I think it really, when I came back, I remember being at home and someone came to visit, and I didn't hear the car pull in the driveway, and then the car door slammed, and I just went completely numb. It sounded identical to a mortar landing, identical, and it was the first time I really experienced that. I was like, okay, no, I'm caught myself before diving somewhere, or what's the drill, right? Someone's going to start yelling at you to do something, right? So I think that's the first time I recognized, that impact, And actually, my father was in the house, who's served in Vietnam. He was in the house at the time, and he goes, "It's a car door." he recognized it right away because he knows, what that's like to come back. He did 2 tours in Vietnam as a U.S. Marine grunt, so that's been he's been obviously incredibly helpful. That's Cash, by the way, my 10-month-old German Shepherd.
Who's not happy about
Well, when I'm recording music, you hear him in the background panting and chewing on his bone. Good boy. And so, that's certainly something that we had a short discussion on about peer support and people understanding. And I believe whether you're a victim of anything that causes you trauma, you need peer support. Whether it's you've been abused, or you've been to war, I think peer support is absolutely vital on your road to recovery. Yeah.
So a couple of things out of that. One, you experienced a whole career progression within one deployment.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
But two, you talking about your father and recognizing that right away. To have somebody that close to you who understands that. And
Yeah.
I just released a video the other day about letting go and people who don't quite understand. Saying, why can't you just get over it? Why can't you move on? And and hearing that from family members and how troubling that can be. So
Yeah.
I think absolutely to have somebody close to you and somebody who's had experience and knew right away, like, that's going to cause a reaction, so diffuse that.
And there's no moving on.
Yeah.
There's no moving on. Those are your experiences. I think we go through post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think depending on how you handle your treatment, you can very easily turn that into post-traumatic growth, and you can grow from it, and you can learn from it. But you are never going to change that. You're never going to change those horrific images. My worst experience was when those guys in my company who I loved them. They were just great people. The 2 warrant officers, Frank Millish and Warrant Nolan. And 2 guys that were in my platoon at the time, Sergeant Tedford and I think it was a corporal at the time, or Williamson. They were killed on October 14th, and so those are traumatic experiences that you have this on a personal level. People that I just like them. They're just good people. They're fun to be around. But on a professional level, there was a reporter one time talking to a general about experience in the military, and the general's like, well, yeah, it's our warrant officers are they're obviously important to our organization because it takes so long to, their experience is vital. And like, well, and I forget what the question was, but it turned into, how long does it take to train a warrant officer that's been in the military for 20 years, 20 years. So you take that collective experience of all those NCOs that were wounded or killed at the time, and I think we all just went, okay, whoa, you really got to, and that goes back to the importance of what we talked about leadership and knowing the job to hire. I was a platoon commander, and on October 14th, our company commander at the time, Steve Brown, because our company commander was wounded. Steve Brown and the sergeant major had gone in for 2 days just to get a shower, and and all of a sudden I was at the point in time I was the LAV captain, and the LAV captain was now the company commander, and I was the 2IC. And October 14th was the attack on Strong Point Center, where those where 2 of our soldiers were killed. So everyone on that tour had to step up in some way, and on that note, the CQ was out. The CQ was the sergeant major at the time. That's the company quartermaster. And on October 14th, as a company, I had to do everything. The vehicle came in with guys that were wounded, and we had to police up and clean up the 2 men that were killed. And And at that point in time, there were some guys that were wounded. They were visibly upset, and I had to go to them and I said, look, I'll give you some time, but we need a lab out there. They need resupply. They need, we need stuff out there. And they're like, we're going. Like there was no hesitation. It was just, we're going. And I mean, that goes just above and beyond what what I expected. I mean, of course you expect professionalism as an NCO, and people say, oh yeah, of course that's their job. But they just experienced two of their best friends killed in front of them, and they said, no, we're going back. We're going back out. Yeah. So all that collective experience, and talking about that with someone like you or someone involved, you get it right away. You just get it. And when you lose people like that, when they're killed, I want to use the right words, when they're killed in action, you don't have time to deal with it. You just don't. You just have to. You have to move on. And I think you learn to swallow it, right? And then that just becomes a habit because, well, you just got to keep going because no one else is here, right? Like this is your job at the time. And I don't think a lot of people, even in the battalion or the company, knew at the time that eventually a U.S. brigade came in to patrol that area. That's how busy it was, and we were at the time a battalion minus, because as soon as the leave starts kicking in, everyone's minus a section, right? And then it's a strange leave plan when you're in combat. It's like, can we rethink this next time? Because I'm losing like one of my best sergeants and they came back, and within 2 days, two of them were killed and a bunch of them had been wounded. And I think that's just bad luck. I don't think that has anything to do with them going on leave. So I think, so there's some bad experiences in there. But then again, there's quite a bit of laughter too. I mean, is there anything funnier than and I know, like, cause I get texts from guys that I'm still in contact with, and he was a singer at the time, and he always sends me stuff on that uncomfortable silence when the officer walks into a conversation and he thinks he's part of the conversation. So I get that, like I think it's great, but I think we truly had great camaraderie. That's what got us through that. We had NCOs that weren't afraid to speak the truth and truth to power, and I think we had, for the most part, officers that tried to manage things, because one of the best lessons I learned was let the NCOs run it and you lead it. And there's two very different things, and that's not easy when you're all type A and you're in there trying to run everything. And when I first got to battalion, that's what I was doing. I was trying to do everything, and commander grabbed me one time and pulled me back and says, just watch this, right? And then I watched all the NCOs do all this. I'm like, okay, yeah, you come with me. We're gonna talk, and then and I'm like, oh, that's how it works, right? Because so you're training, you're just kind of doing everything. You're doing all the roles and stuff, and that's the phase 5 that we talked about. Yeah.
I was the jerk on your phase 4 who was contacting you 300 meters.
That's right. Thank you very much for that. Yeah.
I mean, I say you. I mean, just in
of
general,
course, yeah. Oh, officer cadets, good. Huh?
Yeah.
Let's back up a bit and start pepper podding them across the
yeah. So you're welcome. And depending when you went through, I could very well have been that guy.
True.
It's you talk about those bad experiences, and you just have to keep moving and move past it. And I think for veterans and first responders, that's exactly, everybody experiences post-traumatic stress. That's where the disorder comes, because you're just packing it in because you can't allow yourself that time. Like your guys who are going right back out, they got a mission. They're not allowing themselves that time. So that you absolutely nailed it. That gets to be the habit, and it's a mechanism that nobody teaches you. Hey, you're gonna have to turn this off.
Right, and I think that a training point on that is, I think that grief counseling should be pushed down to the lowest ranks. Because the grief counselors that we had were in CAF, the Padre, we don't. We're not in CAF. We can't go back there. And to have the after action the after action is important. We always do the after actions, but no one ever talked about that. No one ever talked about that.
Maybe the idea of taking that TCCC kind of approach.
Yeah.
Having embedded trauma, combat casualty care
Yeah.
within the sections, within the platoons, and actually doing that with grief counseling.
Yeah. And just say, look, I mean, it's not the captain that the private's going to talk to. But I should know and be able to recognize that. It's not, they're going to talk to whoever's in their section, I just think there's some things that can be done at that time. I'm not saying it's going to, it's going to stop any future post-traumatic stress, but I think it's just good for our mental health and our well-being in that environment to be able to express that.
And it creates that culture of awareness.
And it creates that culture of awareness, and instead of having to right away as a leader at the time, it's like, well, go talk to the Padre if you're having that kind of problem. Well, no, peer support. Like we need to be able to have those. We have difficult conversations to begin with. Why can't we set time aside for an after action? We have there's nothing wrong with talking about casualties. Hey man, how you doing? We just lost 4 guys here, like killed in action, 4 guys, and the next day a 5th guy, and then all these people wounded. And I remember going back, because the 9th platoon at the time was on the left flank, and they weren't part of the attack, they were part of the fire base. And I remember after the A-10 strafed our position, going back for an O group, and you could cut the air, the tension in the air. Obviously, of course, the tension was high, but people that I had gone, all officers I'd gone all through my training with, the NCOs that I've been training with for over 2 years now, they just looked like they were 90 years old. Like you could just see the tension in the grief, and that wouldn't have been a time. I'm not an expert in this. It's only a suggestion to say, hey, these are things that I noticed, during that tour, and that's why the mess, that they used to have the mess, and you'd pull back and have a few drinks, and I still don't think that that's a bad idea, right? You kind of have a field mess, and because that's where you talk about this, and I know first responders were talking about this in the town I grew up in. Firefighters, they used to have this, call it a mini mess, and after calls they would go there, and they had lost funding, and they were might be losing it, and they were talking about the importance of going back there and having a drink and talking about those events, because they experience the same thing. But that brings up another valuable point. I hear this all the time from people with post-traumatic stress, or maybe an anxiety or depression. Oh yeah, but I didn't experience what you experienced.
Quantification.
The quantification.
Yeah.
We all do it. How you got there doesn't matter. You're there. And now, how do you move forward? Well, there's lots of people out there that can help you with that. And I'm also very grateful for, because I've been chosen for the Invictus Games, so I'm very grateful for that, and what that provides. And I can already see the camaraderie building, and there's people on there that I know. There was a platoon commander on there that I know with A company who had some pretty harrowing experiences in Afghanistan, and I'm sure that peer support is going to do wonders, for all of us, right?